Welcome back to Jedi Guybrarian's Holocron, and today we're looking at some extra scenes and details from chapters 12 and 13 in the Rise of Skywalker novel. In Chapter 12, there's an extra scene not in the movie version with the character Zorii and also the Knights of Ren as she is trying to get herself and her friends safely off the planet that's being taken over by the First Order. Zorii's plan to flee to the colonies had been two-pronged. Prong 1, acquire a decent ship. Prong 2, buy safe passage. The second prong of her plan was defunct now that she'd given her captain's medallion to Dameron, but she still had her ship, a BTA-NR-2 Y-Wing. It had cost her nearly 40,000 credits. Some people considered it crass to name fighter craft, but she'd named hers anyway. Comeuppance. Zorii had a lot of scores to settle. The colonies were no longer an option, but as long as she had the comeuppance, she could go somewhere. The only problem was that Zorii was here, crouched on the city's outer wall at the edge of the thieves' quarter, and the comeuppance was there, in a small ravine outside city limits, hidden by a snow tarp. Between them was an entire unit of stormtroopers and one of those butchers. Zorii tapped her helmet to trigger the sensor array. A holographic overlay appeared, and she focused tight on the butcher, his long cloak, his wicked helmet. The holograph zeroed in, circled around, and beeped slightly, identifying him as Ushar, one of the Knights of Ren. She needed a distraction. Then someone screamed. Screaming wasn't uncommon these days, but the voice sounded familiar. Zorii crept to the roof's edge and looked down. Her stomach turned over, hard. It was Jeroban, bleeding and broken in the snow, a black-clad knight standing over him. The knight's massive axe dripped with her friend's blood. Zorii scuttled back and ducked behind an exhaust flute. She closed her eyes futilely against the image burned into her brain. She and Jeroban had been running together for years. He was her right-hand man. She would have to mourn later. She had to get herself and Luda off this icy rock. To try distracting the snowtroopers and Knights of Ren, Zorii puts explosives on a tower to make them go toward the explosions and allow her to run to her ship. However, here's what happens. The tower blew. Icicles flew out, shattered against rooftops. The tower roof itself shot upward like a missile. The troopers standing between her and her ship looked up and did absolutely nothing. They just went back to their business, hardly giving it any mind. "You've got to be kidding me," she muttered aloud. Something tapped her shoulder, and she whirled so fast she almost lost her balance. It was Luda. "I'll distract them," Luda said. "You go." "Not without you." Luda smiled. "You already saved my life, taking me in. I do this and we're even." No, she couldn't stand to lose anyone else. "Luda, where will you? Zorii opened her mask, pleaded with her eyes. "We can do this. We can leave together and you know me. I'll be fine. I always find a way." The girl gave Zorii one last lightning grin and said, "Watch this." And then she was off, scampering over the rooftops like she was born to it. "Hey!" Luda called, waving her arms in plain sight above the troopers. "Down with the First Order! Long live the Resistance!" Blaster fire erupted around the girl as she took off, screaming insults. As one, they pursued, even the black-clad knight. Zorii jumped from the wall and landed in a puff of powder snow. She sprinted for her ship. She breathed in relief when she ducked under the tarp and found her ladder still intact. Zorii triggered the lock with her helmet so that the cockpit canopy was opening as she climbed. She leapt inside, hit the converters, pumped the fuel line, and pedaled the repulsor lift for a quick takeoff. Blaster fire shook her Y-Wing as she pivoted toward a safer launch trajectory, but her shields held. She'd lose her pursuers and make a fast jump to lightspeed. But then she'd double back to Kijimi City and do a quick sweep for her crew. She had to try. With a little luck, maybe she could still rescue Luda or someone else. But where to after that? As her ship broke atmosphere, she decided where she was going. In the very same moment, she forgave Poe Dameron. He had not run away from her and the gang. He had run to something. Zorii would do the same. So Zori has lost some of her closest friends thanks to the cruelty of the First Order, and she has realized that the resistance that Poe is helping in a fight against the First Order is actually a cause worth getting involved in. This is a great text-to-text moment when we can look back at the original novel and film of Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, when young Luke Skywalker has been asked by Obi-Wan Kenobi to join in the fight against the evil Empire. But Luke doesn't think he should get involved until he sees the horrible violence that the stormtroopers have done to his aunt and uncle and realizes he must get involved and try to help stop the Empire's cruelty from continuing. It's also a classic hero's journey mythical archetype known as answering the call. At first the character might refuse the call or run from it, but whether we are talking about a young farm boy like Luke answering the call to become a Jedi, or a young spice runner like Zori answering the call to join the Resistance, this is a moment when a soon-to-be hero makes the choice to get involved and start on a path toward a heroic goal. Okay, so this is chapter 13 when our heroes arrive at a brand new setting, Kef Bir. Kef Bir was technically a moon of Endor, but to Rey it seemed like a whole world. Flying into the atmosphere had revealed vast seas interrupted by tentative patches of land covered mostly with grass. Shrubbery was scarce, settlements non-existent. C-3PO had connected with the HoloNet and informed them that Kef Bir used to be almost entirely underwater. But recent decades had seen several cataclysmic events, which had vented water into the atmosphere and caused tectonic upheaval, revealing more and more land masses. Some theorized that the destruction of the second Death Star was to blame. Debris from the moon-sized base not only had rained down for years, but had collided with several nearby asteroids, creating a chain reaction of bolide hits to the moon's surface and atmosphere. Kef Bir had calmed in the past decade, and life was finding a hold. The moon was rumored to have even attracted a small number of settlers and refugees, though this was unconfirmed, and the moon's official designation remained uninhabited. The air smelled of salt and sun-kissed grass. Water prickled her skin as though something was kicking up spray. The sky roiled with angry gray clouds, but everything remained bright, for the gas giant Endor provided reflected light in addition to the system's sun. A shape began to emerge, like a mountain of metal. No, a whole mountain range of metal. Beside her, Finn gasped. It was a ship, or rather the remains of one, except the ship was larger than any ship Rey had ever seen. Its tattered hull arched out of the violent swells like an upside-down bowl, the jagged remains of its super laser focus lens aimed at the sky. "Well, what is that?" Dio asked. "It's the Death Star," Rey said, staring at the colossal wreck. "It's a bad place, from an old war." "I don't think General Leia had any idea this was here," Poe said, his voice filled with wonder. "A huge chunk of the second Death Star still intact?" "Of course not, Master Poe," C-3PO said. "It was likely submerged for more than a decade after the Battle of Endor. A terrible battle, according to the HoloNet. Oh, I would hate to endure something so dreadful." I just had to read that part aloud because it's a great joke from C-3PO that we didn't get to hear in the film. Because his memory has been wiped, he doesn't realize he was actually in the Battle of Endor that he is describing that he had to look up online. By the way, C-3PO is a type of character known as comic relief. His character is great at lightening things up for like a humorous little moment so that everything isn't so dark and serious all the time. This is what the character Jar Jar was meant to do in the prequels, by the way, even though many believe the filmmakers may have overdone it a bit with him. Also, did you hear C-3PO mention the HoloNet? Yep, that is the Star Wars version of the internet. If you'd like to learn more about the HoloNet, just go look it up on Wikipedia. Now let's take a moment to talk about the setting and about the Battle of Endor. Many people think of Endor as the home of those cute little Ewoks from Return of the Jedi. But Endor is actually a large gas planet, and it is not where the Ewoks live. The Battle of Endor actually took place on the forest moon of Endor. Many Star Wars fans have wondered if debris from the second Death Star's destruction may have landed on the forest moon and hurt the little Ewoks. But now, in Rise of Skywalker, we know that the forest moon was not hit with debris and the Ewoks are okay. You see, our heroes have just landed on a different moon of Endor called Kef Bir, which used to be mostly all oceans, but once the Death Star debris crashed there, it now has caused a lot of tectonic shifting, and it's also here on Kef Bir that we will meet some refugees hiding out on this moon. The new character Janna and her friends who left the First Order just like Finn did. Now let's take a look, also in Chapter 13, at the last scene in the book where General Leia is speaking to the Resistance. It's on pages 163 to 164. I'm very pleased to report that the Millennium Falcon sent us a transmission on long range, Leia said. Their mission is back on track. People clapped one another on the back. She saw smiles. Connix and Rose even hugged. This had been the right choice. Our hope is with them. But our work is here. Commander Tico reports that the 2 fighters we liberated from the Corellian scrapyard are now flight ready. More applause. My congratulations and thanks to the entire engineering corps for pulling off that miracle, but our work has just begun. Leia. Of course he chose the end of her speech to interrupt. You're becoming a pest, she told Luke. She felt his smile. Time to say goodbye, he said. Not just yet. But the word she'd been planning got stuck in her mouth. And instead she ended with, I'm so proud of all of you. As long as we never lose hope, our cause lives on. She stumbled a little on her way to her quarters, but Connix was there in a flash to support her. I think it's an excellent detail in the novel to find out that her brother's spirit is with her at this difficult time. I also love that Leia's final words to the Resistance, to everyone, are about a popular theme in Star Wars that she mentions more than once in the series. Never lose hope. That's a message we can all use in real life, too. There's always hope, and never give up. Okay, one last little part to read today. It comes from page 166. No, not Order 66. I'm talking about page 166, and it is when Rey is first entering the old throne room of the Death Star. Ahead, the sloped floor led to a huge viewport, half shattered, bayed out to the sky. Before, it was a dais of some sort, containing the ocean-soaked remains of a chair. No, a throne. This had been the Emperor's throne room. Luke had fought Darth Vader here, and the energy, or maybe memory, of that battle still lingered. She closed her eyes and sensed terror, pain, regret, and a determination to save someone who was deeply loved. I really like this little moment, which can make Star Wars fans flash back to Return of the Jedi, when the Emperor is stopped as Anakin saves his son Luke, and Luke saves his father from the dark side, because of their connection through love. Perhaps even their connection to the love that Anakin once had for Padme, Luke and Leia's mother, whom he also wanted to save. Now, I know that in the film Rise of Skywalker and in the book, this scene is also where Rey is about to face a dark vision of herself turned Sith. But I think it's very important here in the novel that Rey first connects with the feeling of wanting to save someone and the feeling of love. Here she is in a place of evil, the Death Star, but she feels this strong connection to saving someone and loving someone instead of destroying and hating someone. This, I believe, is how she is able to resist the dark vision of herself, and later to resist the Emperor too. And this is what truly makes Rey more of a Skywalker than a Palpatine. Okay, that's all for now. Let's try to focus on saving and loving and hoping. And may the Force and reading be with you.